The first thing I heard when I entered the imperial throne hall was laughter. Not the warm laughter that once filled our small courtyard. This laughter was quiet, polished, and cruel, the kind noblemen used when they believed someone had fallen too far to ever stand again. I walked beneath their staring eyes without lowering my head. For 1,000 years, those same people had called me a useless husband who survived only because of his wife. I had never corrected them. Hiding my strength had once been the price of living peacefully beside the woman I loved. At the far end of the hall sat my wife, Empress Seraphine Aurelia. Her long silver blonde hair fell over a white imperial gown embroidered with golden phoenixes. The crown on her head was new. So was the coldness in her blue eyes. A man stood beside her instead of me. Prince Selim Soulheart, heir of the divine realm, wore radiant golden armor over a white ceremonial coat. His long golden hair rested against his shoulders, and the divine mark between his brows glowed brightly enough to draw every eye in the hall. My 8-year-old daughter Lyra stood alone below the throne. Her small hands were clenched around the blue fabric of her dress. She had inherited Seraphine's silver blonde hair and my dark gray eyes. She was also the only person in that hall who was not laughing. Seraphine did not ask me to come closer. "Aldric," she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "Our marriage ends today." No surprise crossed my face. The imperial servants had already removed my belongings from our chambers before sunrise. "Give me one honest reason," I said. For a moment, her fingers tightened around the throne's armrest. I saw hesitation in her eyes, the faint shadow of the woman who once slept against my shoulder beneath a leaking temple roof. Then Selim placed one armored hand on the throne beside her. Golden divine energy flowed from him and wrapped around Seraphine's shoulders. Her hesitation disappeared. She straightened her back and looked down at me as an empress rather than a wife. "You possess no cultivation, title, army, or bloodline," she said. "For 1,000 years, I protected you from ridicule. But the Western kingdoms are gathering their forces. The empire needs someone powerful standing beside its ruler." Selim descended one step and smiled at me. "Do not mistake this for cruelty. Some men are born to support greatness from the shadows. Others are born to stand beside it." A few nobles laughed again, waiting to see whether I would lose my temper. I nearly smiled. The irony was so perfect that his insult felt like a private joke. Selim was celebrated as the strongest young cultivator in the 9 kingdoms. Yet the power he displayed so proudly would not have been enough to open the first gate of my abandoned palace. Seraphine raised her hand. A golden imperial decree unfolded above the hall. My name vanished from the royal family register. My estate, treasury, servants, and the lakeside house where Lyra had been born were transferred to the crown. "You will leave the capital before sunset," Seraphine continued. "You may not use the imperial surname, discuss our marriage, or return without permission." Her chief minister stepped forward with a satisfied expression and announced my destination: the Ashen Frontier. The laughter became louder. The Ashen Frontier was not a province. It was a graveyard stretching along the northern edge of the empire. Demonic beasts hunted there. Black storms erased roads overnight, and entire military units sometimes vanished without leaving bones behind. Then Seraphine looked toward Lyra. "Our daughter will remain in the palace." That sentence hurt more than losing every possession carrying my name. Lyra's head snapped up. Before any guard could stop her, she ran across the hall and threw both arms around my waist. "I'm going with father," Lyra shouted. Seraphine rose from the throne. "You are the imperial princess. You cannot throw away your future because you are frightened." Lyra buried her face against my robe. "I'm not frightened of leaving. I'm frightened you'll stop me." Selim approached us carrying a crystal pendant filled with swirling divine light. He knelt and softened his voice. "Stay here, little princess. This pendant can awaken your sacred bloodline. You will have the finest teachers, servants, dresses, and suites in all 9 kingdoms." Lyra stared at the pendant. For a second, Selim appeared confident that he had won. Then she looked directly into his eyes. Can it make mother love father again? His smile froze. Even the nobles who hated me avoided looking at Seraphine. When Selim failed to answer, Lyra pushed the pendant away. Then I don't want it. She turned toward Seraphine. Father stayed beside me when I was sick. Father taught me to read. Father cooked when you were cultivating. Father remembers every birthday. Seraphine's face slowly lost its color. Lyra, enough. My daughter shook her head. You said father has nothing. But whenever I needed someone, he was the only one who was always there. The hall remained so silent that I could hear Seraphine's uneven breath. I knelt so Lyra and I were at the same height. The frontier will be dangerous. We may not have servants, silk beds, or honey cakes every morning. She wiped her tears with her sleeve. Will you be there? I placed my hand gently on her head. Always. Lyra finally smiled. Then it won't be dangerous. I stood and took her hand. We turned toward the doors without asking permission. A pair of Imperial guards moved to block our path, but Seraphine raised her hand and ordered them aside. As we passed Selim, he spoke quietly enough that only Lyra, Seraphine, and I could hear. Enjoy the time you have left. A powerless man will not survive 1 week in the Ashen Frontier. I stopped for only a heartbeat, but I did not turn around. You may be right, I said. A powerless man would never survive there. Selim mistook my answer for surrender. Behind us, the nobles began laughing again. None of them noticed the white jade floor beneath my feet tremble once before becoming still. Deep within my soul stood 9 black chains wrapped around a throne older than the empire itself. For 1,000 years, I had kept them intact because Seraphine once asked me to leave war behind. Now the first chain split apart with a sound like distant thunder. A thin stream of my true aura escaped. Every flame inside the throne hall bent toward me. Selim's divine mark flickered. Seraphine's crown trembled against her hair. Far beneath the palace, an ancient guardian beast opened its eyes for the first time in 10,000 years. I tightened the broken seal before anyone could understand what they had felt. Then I walked out of the palace with my daughter beside me and the setting sun ahead. By nightfall, the empire would believe its useless former consort had been discarded. Soon, it would remember why its oldest laws forbade anyone from awakening the man behind the 9 seals. By the time Lyra and I reached the capital's outer district, the sun had already begun to disappear behind the palace towers. Neither of us looked back. The streets were crowded with merchants closing their shops, soldiers changing shifts, and citizens gathering around public crystal screens displaying the announcement of my banishment. My face appeared above every major square beside the words, "Former Imperial Consort." The image made me look far more miserable than I actually felt. Lyra stared at one of the screens and frowned. "Father, they used your worst portrait." I looked up at it. I didn't know I had a best one. She considered that seriously before nodding. "You do. It's the one where you're holding my birthday cake." Somehow, those words made the noise of the capital feel farther away. We had left the palace carrying nothing except the clothes on our backs. Seraphine had seized my estate, my treasury, my servants, and even the small storage ring I had worn publicly. Fortunately, she had only taken the things she knew existed. The true treasury sealed inside my soul still contained enough wealth to purchase the empire several thousand times over. I could have opened it immediately. Instead, I reached into my sleeve and counted 12 copper coins. Lyra leaned closer, watching with complete seriousness. "Are we poor now?" she asked. "By imperial standards, yes." She waited. "By normal standards?" I looked at the coins again. "Also yes." Lyra nodded as though accepting an important military mission. "Then we have to save money." 10 steps later, the smell of freshly baked honey cakes drifted across the street. She stopped moving. Her eyes followed a tray of golden cakes as the baker carried it toward the window. She said nothing, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. I spent 4 of our 12 coins on 2 cakes. Lyra accepted hers with both hands, then looked at the remaining coins with visible guilt. "I thought we were saving money." "We are." I took a bite from my cake. We saved ourselves from walking to the frontier hungry. She smiled at that, and for the first time since leaving the throne hall, she looked like an ordinary child instead of a princess who had just lost half her family. We continued toward the northern gate while eating. People recognized us as we passed. Some whispered. Others stepped aside as though misfortune might spread through touch. Near the gate, a noblewoman pulled her son away from Lyra. "Don't go near her," she whispered loudly. She chose the banished man over the empress. Lyra lowered her eyes, but before I could speak, the noblewoman's son slipped free and ran back. He placed a small wooden knight in Lyra's hand. "For the frontier," the boy said, "so you won't be scared." His mother dragged him away before Lyra could answer, but she held the toy tightly for the rest of the walk. The northern gate stood beneath a fortress wall 300 feet high. Beyond it stretched the Imperial Road, disappearing toward mountains covered in permanent black clouds. For guards blocked our path. Their captain was a broad, scarred man named Garen Holt, wearing worn silver armor beneath a dark blue military cloak. Garen studied the imperial decree, then looked at Lyra. "Children are forbidden beyond the Ashen Gate. The frontier is under a level 7 beast warning." "She comes with me," I replied. Garen's jaw tightened. "Then she dies with you. I'm not opening this gate so a child can be eaten before sunrise." His words sounded harsh, but his eyes kept returning to Lyra. He was not trying to insult us. He was trying to save her. Lyra stepped forward before I could answer. "Captain, I chose to go." Garen looked down at her. "Children choose sweets for dinner. That doesn't make it wise." A violent impact struck the other side of the gate. Dust fell from the fortress walls. Every soldier immediately drew a weapon. A second impact bent the reinforced iron inward. Something enormous scraped its claws across the metal, producing a sound that silenced the entire checkpoint. Garen shouted for the civilians to retreat. Soldiers formed 3 defensive lines while archers climbed the walls and loaded arrows engraved with blue runes. The gate exploded inward before they were ready. Broken iron and burning wood flew across the courtyard as 3 ash wolves charged through the smoke. Each beast stood taller than a warhorse. Their bodies were covered in black fur and cracked plates of volcanic stone, while gray smoke poured continuously from their mouths. The first wolf landed among the front line and crushed 2 shields beneath one paw. The second leapt toward the archers. The third fixed its burning red eyes on Lyra. Garen threw himself between us and the beast. He raised his sword with both hands, but the wolf struck him once and sent him crashing across the stones. Lyra froze. The wooden knight slipped from her fingers. The ash wolf lowered its body and sprang directly toward her. I stepped in front of my daughter. For 1,000 years, I had allowed the world to believe I was powerless. Breaking that lie now would draw attention far beyond the Empire. Then I heard Lyra whisper my name behind me. Every hesitation disappeared. I raised one hand. The wolf stopped in midair so suddenly that the force behind its leap cracked the ground beneath us. It hung less than 3 feet from my palm, claws extended and jaws open, but not a single strand of its fur could move. The soldiers stared. Garen pushed himself onto one elbow, blood running from his forehead. Even the other 2 wolves stopped attacking and turned toward me. I looked into the suspended beast's burning eyes. "You frightened my daughter." The wolf's rage vanished. Its ears lowered, and its enormous body began to tremble. I closed my fingers. The volcanic armor covering all 3 wolves shattered at once, falling away in black fragments. Without their armor, the creatures collapsed onto their stomachs. They pressed their heads against the ground and whimpered like punished dogs. Lyra slowly stepped out from behind me. She looked at the kneeling monsters, then looked up at me. "Father, I thought you didn't have cultivation." "I don't," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "You stopped 3 giant wolves with one hand. Good posture can accomplish surprising things." Garen stared at me as if deciding whether blood loss had damaged his mind. Then Lyra walked toward the nearest wolf and carefully touched its nose. The beast remained completely still. After a moment, its tail struck the ground once. Lyra's fear disappeared immediately. "Can we keep it?" she asked. Garen coughed so violently that one of his soldiers had to support him. "It attacked the gate," I reminded her. Lyra scratched behind the wolf's ear. "Maybe it was hungry." The enormous beast rolled slightly onto its side. I looked at the shattered gate, the injured soldiers, and the 3 supposedly savage monsters waiting for my decision. "Fine," I said. "One." All 3 wolves raised their heads at the same time. Lyra pointed at the largest one. "That one." The other 2 immediately looked offended. I released a trace of my aura and sent the remaining wolves back into the wilderness. They fled so quickly that the ground shook beneath their paws. The chosen wolf lowered itself before Lyra like a trained mount. She climbed onto its back, hugged its thick neck, and named it Cinder before I could object. Garen finally managed to stand. "Who are you?" he asked. I picked up Lyra's wooden knight and placed it safely inside my robe. "According to the decree," I said, "a powerless man banished to the Ashen Frontier." Garen looked at the kneeling wolf and then at the destroyed gate. "That decree is either wrong," he muttered, "or the palace has lost its mind." I decided not to tell him that both possibilities were true. The soldiers opened what remained of the northern passage. Lyra rode Cinder beside me while the last light faded from the sky. Behind us, Garen ordered every witness to remain silent. Ahead of us, the black clouds over the frontier began to rotate around a distant mountain. Something ancient had sensed the fracture in my first seal. Deep inside the Ashen Frontier, a pair of enormous silver eyes opened beneath the earth. Lyra leaned down from Cinder's back. "Father, do you think Mother misses us yet?" I continued walking without answering immediately. Far behind us, in the Imperial Palace, Seraphine stood alone in Lyra's empty bedroom, holding the rejected divine pendant in her hand. For the first time since choosing Selim, my former wife began to wonder whether the silence she had gained was worth what it had cost.